Find your mats. So again, these are rich conversations that are wonderful to continue. Huh? Hmm? Yeah. Lying on your back. Legs long. And arms somewhere comfortable by your side with your palms down. And feel how you organise to have your palms down. So if you didn't have the palms down, just feel how much of you do you include in the image of that movement. So just play around a little bit with that. If I'm going to turn my hands, what gets involved? What gets involved centrally that maybe allows my arms to be lighter to do this? What responds in me? And again, this is a really rich level of inquiry that we'll keep recalibrating, have more approximations of as we go through the process of, well, what is there? What isn't there? Is there a difference if when you turn your arms a little bit up and down, that you get an image of all of yourself, that you begin to think, I've got my feet and my legs and my pelvis and my back and my belly and my neck and my head. How easy is it for you to get that you are doing this movement? Because the language we use in ATM keeps taking us back to bits. So how are you going with this really big learning to learn principle? That it's me doing the movement. And then next time you've got your palms down, leave them there. You can choose which hand you want to do this with and begin to bell hand one hand. And just, how do you do this on your back? Because remember when we're on your stomach, your elbow had to mobilize, didn't it? Your shoulder girdle had to do something. And you're constrained here because your elbow can't go further back into the table. So what has to move a little bit more? What has to move more in your shoulder? In your shoulder girdle? Does your shoulder come forward to do your bell hand? And remember, the bell hand is the fingers. It's not just the flexion extension. It's all the fingers being long and soft and drawing together and going apart. And as much as you can, you're finding this sense that I don't have to flex my fingers. They can just stay really long. And if they can stay really long rather than bending in my fingers, what mobilizes differently? What does that ask further through my system? If my fingers stay long, whether I'm bringing my fingers together or taking them apart. Maybe keeping the fingers long does something different in your shoulder girdle. Takes your shoulder in a different way than if you're bending your fingers. And again, is it still you doing the movement? So as you're doing this, what would your head want to do? What would your chest maybe want to do? If you were going to maybe get interested in your head looking at your hand, would it be when your fingers draw together? Or would it be when your fingers open up? So what happens in our attention if we're really doing this in a way that we're interested in it? So feel what happens if in your attention, if you do this and you don't let your head move. How are you using your attention there if your head isn't free to move? Then go back and allow your head to move. Because one of the really big things we've been exploring in this is this lightness and freedom of your head and how that's predicated on the lightness of your arms and legs. And do the other hand. There's no constraint here, Helen, except the floor. So can you verbalize a little bit more? So again, Helen, rather than should my shoulder be lifting, no, that's fine, because there's your question. It's wonderful. What could happen in your shoulder? But see if you can start it from your fingers, Helen. No? Would your elbow bend? So spread your attention, Helen, because what you're really saying is I'm attending to not putting too much effort there, but maybe there's another part of you that's efforting, that's stopping your shoulder from being involved or working hard, that until you begin to shift your attention and begin to feel, what are some things you could do? Is your pelvis free? We've been doing that a lot, haven't we, in these lessons? Are your legs free? Are my ribs soft? Even before you start the movement. No? So again, and this is the trick, because this is what happens to our attention. We want to be able to focus our attention. We want to be able to bring something to the foreground, but without losing the big picture. And it's a skill. So this is one level of our inquiry, these very small movements, giving us a lot of time finding how I can reduce the effort, finding this connection through me. My eyes can be soft. That I can be responsive. And then could you begin to alternate one, then the other? Again, does anything happen in your pelvis? In your legs, in your head? Not that you have to make it happen, but if there's something not happening, we know that there's still unnecessary work going on. No? You might not be able to feel what that unnecessary work is, but we know that there's still work going on. And part of your discovery is to slowly feel, what are those things? Okay, leave that and roll onto your belly. And just notice where you turn your head. Legs long. So where would you need to put your head and your arms for your legs to be long? And of course, sort of makes sense. You know, if we're going to keep your legs a little bit more, they don't need to be symmetrical, but that you don't necessarily have to bring one up. What has to adapt more through the upper part of you, through the middle of you, that maybe some of you are still finding, through your shoulder blades, through your sternum? So whichever way your head is turned at the moment, could you very gently roll your pelvis a little left and right and feel, which way is it easier to roll my pelvis? So we're not now just rolling your pelvis, but the question is, with my head turned this way, can I feel that there is a difference, that there's having my head in this asymmetrical position is going to influence this movement of my pelvis? So again, you're not trying to make the movement of your pelvis symmetrical here. Your question is, how does my head turn this way influence the movement of my pelvis? And whichever way it is, could you find a way to turn your head the opposite way? Go slowly and just feel, what does your pelvis do? What do your legs do to maybe help you to turn your head? You know, do your buttocks come on and you tighten everything up? How do you get this softness to roll across your belly, that your hips are free? And you're simply noticing, how big a movement does my pelvis need to do this? And you can make it as big as you like. That's your question at the moment. How much do I need to do through, if you like, the bottom half of me? And again, are your shoulders still soft? And not just soft, but alive. that they're ready to be part of the image of this action. So that you're doing this in a way to give you information about why is it that my head is easier to turn one way? What's it got to do with the side that is ready, more of me is ready to be involved in the action? And again, really, as you do that you're not bracing anywhere, you're not having to push anywhere, just this gentle roll. And what do your shoulders do? Because we've been doing the bell hand. So what's happening in your elbows and your forearms and your fingers? Have you got that image of your whole arm? This area that so many of us tend to work really hard. So now could you turn your head to the left? Find a real position of ease so that your pelvis is ready to roll a little bit, your shoulders are ready to shift the weight a little bit, your heels are ready to respond a little bit, your legs, everything. And now begin the bell hand with your left hand in this position. And feel, how do you find a way to feel this could connect with the movements we've just been doing? But could the bell hand lifting make your head feel even a little bit more comfortable on the ground? So your elbow can now pick up into the air. So when would your pelvis begin to roll? What would your other shoulder do? What would your other elbow do? How do you get through that big junction at the base of your neck? So that you could begin to feel this bell hand movement. And you can absolutely include a little bit of what we finished with the other day. You know, we were doing a little bit of a swimming action. To take it gently though. But your arm is always adapting and moving. So your question here is, when I allow a big movement to happen, am I stopping the movement of my arm and everything starts to happen in my pelvis and lower back and legs? Or am I constantly feeling this softening in my shoulder girdle, in my collarbone, in my elbow? So you begin to feel this bell movement. Will go right through to your heels. Probably your Left leg might begin to come a little bit up to the side. Your left heel's probably going to turn more than your right. Maybe you can feel your right leg getting a little longer. And this freedom through your shoulders. This softness in your belly. Something about this movement is making your head more comfortable because your head is actually getting a little lighter. And then turn your head to the right. Again, feel how you do that. How much of you is in the image now when you turn your head to the right? Are you feeling it's a little easier to shift your weight a little across the ground? And could you do that same movement now with your belling your right hand? And again, this softness of the fingers always coming together and going apart. And again, remember, it was always the same movement, but some of you at the end of last week found instead of the fingers lifting directly away from the floor, which was a little constraining for a lot of you, you started to start with your arm long and reach back more on a horizontal plane so that the bell was being done along a horizontal plane rather than a vertical plane. And again, you're looking for this connection deep through the middle of you, across to the other shoulder, through the base of your neck. How does it get through that maybe now your left leg could get a little longer? So this diagonal line that we've been exploring in lots of ATMs. This diagonal connection. Have a rest on your back. And very gently begin to roll your hands a little, or all of you. Is there a little bit more involved if you are now going to turn your hands more palm up or thumb up or palm down. And is there a difference if you're going to do that by rolling across the ground, which is one way of doing it, that you're rolling across your hand, or if you lift your hand to place it down in a different, so that you lift your hands to make them palm up, or you lift your arms to make them palm down? What's the difference between rolling and lifting? How do I mobilize myself differently if I'm rolling or lifting? If you rolled your head side to side at the moment, how would you do it if you imagined someone had their hand on your forehead? Where would your head go? What trajectory would it head off in at the moment if you're thinking of someone with their hand on your forehead? And how far through you does that movement go? And come back onto your belly. Head to the left. And again, that's your only constraint, that your head is to the left. So where would you like your head to be? To the left? Do you have it looking down a little bit, or looking straight out, or looking up? And if someone was going to put their hand on your head now, on your skull, where would it, and if they were going to move it, where would it move most easily? Would it be a little roll that it might do, or it might go a little bit up and down? How easy is it to make a little yes or no movement with your head at the moment? And really get a sense with your head to the left. Has anything changed from that previous from when you first lay down? Are your heels a little bit different in where you are on them, or where they are pointing or oriented? Are your shoulders a little bit asymmetrical, or do you still love having that symmetry up in your shoulders? So if you're really feeling that you're still really symmetrical, just move your head a little bit. And remember, when we're thinking of moving the head, your head, it's all of you. So it's not just that you're lifting your neck, but that you're finding a way to make it a little light by connecting it through to the rest of you. Okay. So as small a movement as you want to, could you begin making this bell hand with your left hand again? You can have your right arm wherever it is, wherever you want it to be. Wherever you feel it makes this movement easier. And begin to feel right at the beginning of the movement, if I'm going to make this bell hand with my left hand, which foot do I feel a connection to? Is it my left foot or my right foot? Which one just feels a little bit more in my image? My left foot or my right foot? Left, you're facing left, so your left hand is doing the bell hand. You're facing left, so your left hand is doing the bell hand. And whichever foot you decide on, which one just feels a little clearer in my image, as you begin to make the bell hand, could you think of your left index finger and your left whichever toe it is, the second toe on whichever foot you're paying attention to? So can you connect in your awareness and in your attention that there could be a connection between my index finger of my left hand and what would be, if you like, the index toe, the second toe? Yep. So it doesn't need to be big. This is much more. You're looking, can I find, not make a connection happen, but what happens if in my attention I've got the image of my index finger and my second toe? So you're doing this gentle bell hand. And then could you think of your middle finger and your middle toe? And begin to feel, is there something about this that mobilizes my foot a little differently, that by thinking of this connection, and the thinking is in sensing, does something become a little bit more available or a little bit more in my image? And then you do the same thing with your ring finger and your fourth toe. So you can feel right from the beginning of the movement. Have I got my ring finger? Is that in my image? Is the bell different if I'm thinking of my ring finger rather than if I'm thinking of my index finger? Does that send the trajectory a little bit differently through my arm? And if you're thinking, doesn't mean you have to be, but if you're thinking of your right foot being connected to your left hand, does this help you maybe to lengthen your right foot a little bit more, to roll across the bones of your foot a little more? And then you've got your little finger, the little finger of your left hand. And if it's the right foot that you're going to, that's absolutely fine. But how does it also change your right foot? Sorry, if it's your left foot, sorry, with your left hand that you're thinking of. Sorry? If you could keep it longer, it'd be great. your question here, Anna, is it's a really good question. Is that helping the movement or getting in the way of the movement? Because this is what you're going to do with your clients all the time. What is it that I'm looking for? And then what about your thumb of your left hand and your big toe? How does that maybe change softly the trajectory of what might happen in your forearm, in your elbow, through to your shoulder? So which parts of your hand do you pay more attention to? That's what we're exploring. Have you got some habits here? And then could you put all 5, so your thumb and your fingers of your left hand, all together and match them down to your foot, that you can have all 5 toes in your image. And can you feel, to do that, usually we really have to soften our attention. And then come back for a moment to making a bigger movement of your bell hand. And just see what's that done by exploring that relationship between your fingers and your toes, by really coming from the periphery. Is it a little easier to feel that your right leg gets a little longer, rolls over the toes, whereas your left leg rolls more over the side of your foot? And have a rest. So remember, Feldenkrais always said, when people say, am I going to lose it, this movement? And he always said, it's not yours until you can include it in every orientation. You haven't learnt a relationship, or you could say a movement pattern, or you could be thinking more about, you haven't learnt how this part of you can be included in your image until you include it in any orientation. So we're going to be looking at, over the rest of this segment, how do we find more of ourselves in our image? How do we find that our head can be free? But free doesn't mean disconnected. How do we find this ability to find lightness, mobility across the ground, including more of ourselves in our image? Come back to your belly again. And this time your head to the right. And again, notice, how do you do that? How much of you is ready to be there? And then go back and do that again and feel, without thinking, what would I normally do to turn my head to the right? What are the parts? Where might I effort normally? What are the parts that I stop moving? And then go back to your left again, just for a moment, with your head to the left, thinking of that movement we just did with the hand through to the leg. And feel, how much of yourself were you including in the image of that by the end? What had you learned about making it a little lighter or easier? And turn your head back to the right, keeping that quality that you just had in your movement, that when you were imagining it, and all those parts of yourself that were in the image of turning. And could you begin to imagine doing this same movement to the right? Thinking through that same process of, you were going to begin the bell hand and feel which foot might be more in your image on this side. Is it the same foot, or is it a different foot with your head this way? And just begin to go through that process again of the different fingers, the different toes, doing the bell hand. So that you're connecting each finger through to the foot that makes sense for you. Maybe for some of you, it's the same foot no matter which way you turn your head. That's fine. So what's this like, getting this picture of one end of me to the other? Your index finger and your second toe, your middle finger and your middle toe. And is there something about having found this length through your hand, which has got a much bigger area on your sensory motor cortex, of finding this ability that I don't have to flex my fingers to make this bell hand, that it's long and soft, mobilizing something through my shoulder, my chest, down through the middle of me, into my pelvis and legs, and not forgetting the other shoulder. Really giving yourself time to feel where are the bits that aren't clear in my image. So you've got long, wide toes, long, wide fingers. And once you've got in your imagination, do it a few times if you haven't done it. Did how you were mobilizing things in your imagination match what you do when you do the movement? And then begin so you're going to bell hand with your right hand, and you're going to feel that through and feel, when could I begin to turn my head to bell hand with the other hand, to start to find a way to turn my head to the left. And really feel, how's this influenced by, if your connection is your right hand to your left foot and your left hand to your right foot, or if your connection is your right hand to your right foot and your left hand to your left foot. Just to play. What's that connection? How does that influence this very gentle swimming movement? If my left hand and right foot are more connected, or if my left hand and left foot are more connected. Does one move my head more through space? Does one shift my weight more? So if you started to do a bigger swimming movement, again, just what's easy for you, and your head was turning, when would your head turn? How light have your arms got? Where's your weight rolling? Would your head be free and light to breathe? Which leg gets long with which hand? And what's the timing like here? Is everything going together? So your head knows what your pelvis is doing. Your shoulders know what your head and pelvis are doing. Your heels know what your head and pelvis is doing. Your feet. And roll over and rest on your back. Notice, has anything changed in your sense of width? There's something about thinking of all your fingers and all your toes. Change something in the width, what parts of maybe your shoulders touch the ground, or your ribs, or in your pelvis. There's maybe something settled into the ground that for some of you might not normally be there. Is there some place you can breathe now that might not normally be available? And if you were going to roll your head, you imagine someone's hand on your head, and with a lightness that with their hand, they're showing you there's the ground, and it's really easy to move the back of your head across the ground. So there's a lightness in their arms as they're doing this. They're not pushing you into the ground. The lightness in their arms allows your head to be light and your shoulders to respond. Your chest to respond. Because again, the more of you that's on the ground in your back, the more you'll be able to feel that your head connects through down to your pelvis and your legs. Come up to sitting. And just see, what's your awareness of your hands and your feet now? And if you were going to do the bell hand now in sitting, you could do both hands together, or you could alternate. And again, if you're in a symmetrical position, how does it influence how that goes through? You can go asymmetrical. How do you feel through this softness and lightness in your hands through the rest of yourself? And just go all the way through to your foot. Does one hand feel more connected to one foot than the other? And maybe you could keep this going, this gentle bell hand, if you've decided on asymmetry as you're doing it. Could you use that to begin to shift from one side sitting to the other? Where are your feet? How do you lighten your legs and begin to turn them one side or the other? Does your pelvis know your head? So at any point, did your hands stop belling? One hand, the other hand. So that your shoulders are always doing something different. Your chest is always doing something different to cope with this alternating bell hand. this softness through your upper back, in your shoulder blades, in your collarbones. The softness in your head that you could look up or down or around, or your eyes can be soft. So how do we transfer this feeling of the lesson into how you're going to make this transition up to standing? And you've got all your toes and all your fingers. And come up, find a way to come up to standing. Everything stays soft. Your feet are there. Your hands are there. And what does this ability to keep your hands and your feet in your image do with allowing some of you to soften your neck and your head, to soften your eyes? And again, this feeling of the bell hand in standing. And how could that take you a little bit into walking this bell hand? And would one hand come more into your awareness? Than the other, depending on whether you're taking your leg, whether your foot's weight bearing or whether it's becoming light to lift. But the big thing is transferring that feeling of the periphery letting your head be free. And what does this change in your image of yourself? What directions maybe does it open up for you in terms of your forward and your back and your side to side and your up and down? Could you imagine you were swimming? And you don't have to do the whole thing, but just what would it feel like at the moment to be floating in water? And how could you take this feeling? How would this influence now how we go into a break? And what could you keep of this as you go into the break? And still be able to be free to talk to people if you choose, to make your cup of tea, to make your way to the bathroom, whatever.